Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. Today I have a very special guest with me. Can we say icon? I think we can say icon because he's a screenwriter, he's a playwright, he's an author, a former actor, and you probably best know him from the movie Poltergeist. I have Mr. Martin Casella with me today, and we're going to be talking about the movie and really whatever he wants to talk about. I'm here to just serve him. So I hope you guys enjoy the interview. I'm going to ask you a very basic question here. And I know it's a long story, so you can tell as much or as little as you want to. But I did want to ask you to talk a little bit about how you got into acting and then how you got the role in Poltergeist and what led up to that.
Well, I loved movies when I was a kid. I used to get dropped off in a movie theater nearby with a buddy and I. And when I got to junior high or middle school, depending on where you live in the country, I took a play production class for 3 years, and I loved it. And I got to be in big, plays, and I continued doing that in high school. And then I went to college. I only applied back in the 70s when I went to college. We didn't apply to 700 schools like people do now. I applied to two colleges. One of them was right outside of Los Angeles, which was California Institute of the Arts, which is a school started by the Disneys. And the other school that I applied to was Juilliard, big fancy drama school in
Ooh.
New York. And I'd never been on an airplane before, and I flew, but I was 16 or 17 when I had to fly to Houston to do an audition for Juilliard. They didn't do any in Los Angeles, and I didn't get in there, but I did get into Cal Arts. I loved it. I loved being an actor. I loved it. But when school was done, they trained us really well how to be actors, but they didn't train us how to go out in the world and sell ourselves and all that kind of stuff. So when I graduated from college, I just didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't want to I was burnt out on theater. I'd been doing theater since I was 11. And so I got a job working in the movie industry. My dad worked in movies for a very long time. And he said to me, "Well, you got to get a job. You got to do something." And I said, "Great. Uh, what do you suggest?" And he said, "I'm starting a film next Monday. It's a big, giant, huge studio movie. It was one of the largest productions ever. I mean, there were days when we had 70 to 100, 150 Teamsters working. And it was 1941, Steven Spielberg's gigantic sort of multi-star, big, giant World War II comedy. And so I started working on that for my dad in the production office, which was in Burbank, California, right near Warner Brothers Pictures. And our office, I had an office with my dad, and we took care of all the hundreds or so drivers. And one day Steven Spielberg walked down the hall, and I was a gigantic fan from Jewel and Jaws and Sugarland Express, and I'd seen Close Encounters about 5 times. And I think I told you this once before. I'm such a nerd. I learned the hand signal that they use in Close Encounters and the 5 music. And I was all ready I was going to do it for him. And then I thought, no, that's too nerdy. He'll think I'm weird and never speak to me. I got to meet him, and it was the end of a long hallway, and my dad's office was at the end, and Steven's office was right there. I always get teased by my friends when I call him Steven. Like, I do know him. I did know him. I worked with him for 3 years, and since then on and off. So, and my friends always tease me that I'm a name dropper. I don't know what else to call him. Mr. Spielberg sounds a little too, I don't know what, but so I met him in the hallway, and we talked and chatted, and I told him I was a big film fan, and he said, "Oh, great, it'll be great to see you around for the next 6 months." And at the end of the principal photography, um, uh, my dad said, "Hey, I spoke to the assistant director. We've got 3 months of inserts and pickup shots and reshoots, and 1941 has fantastic special effects, lots of them. And we built there, we didn't do it, the unbelievably brilliant, talented special effects miniature team built Hollywood Boulevard, a miniature, which was actually about 4 stories high. It was huge. They recreated 8 blocks, and there's scenes where an airplane flies down, and it's spectacular. And we were there a lot. There's a big giant scene on a Ferris, well, several scenes on a huge Ferris wheel, which was shot in a studio. And while I was there, one of my jobs, learning how to be an assistant director, was to be there for Steven if he needed anything. And I'd run errands, or I'd go do things, or I'd run back to his office and get things. And I was always there. And Kathleen Kennedy and I had started work the same day. She worked at the end of the hallway. She was the person at the front desk. Then she worked for one of the producers. And she finally, after 3 or 4 months, became Steven Spielberg's secretary first, and then assistant. And she and I had gotten to be friends because our offices were, literally 5 feet away from each other. I could look around the corner and we could have chats, and we loved movies. And we actually started going, seeing movies. We went out and saw movies together, and I hung out with her and her boyfriend at the time. And we just got along. And at the end of that, Steven and Kathy called me into the office and said, well, in about 4 months, we're going to start shooting Raiders of the Lost Ark. And we want you to be Steven's assistant on the film for pre-production, the shooting, the 4 months of shooting, and then post-production. And I was just blown away. I couldn't even speak. And I said, well, let me think about this. And I went to my dad and I said, well, they offered me this job. He said, oh, I know. They came to me in advance and made sure, it wasn't you. They weren't taking you away from our family business or whatever. So, so I got to do that. And I worked on Raiders of the Lost Ark in pre-production, during the casting and all sorts of other things. I was that assistant that, I did everything from back then. The scripts were all stamped with numbers because it was a top secret project. And that way you got a script that had a number. And if that script got out in public or was copied, photocopied or anything, they knew exactly where to go to trace it to. So I got to take the script to, first it was Tom Selleck, who was going to play for Magnum PI, the original. He was going to play Indiana Jones. And I took the script to him, and I had to wait in a car outside his house for 2 hours. I took the script to John Williams, and then later on, I took the script to Harrison Ford when CBS wouldn't let Tom Selleck go. So
Okay, I was gonna say I thought Harrison Ford was Indiana Jones.
Yeah. Well, Harrison Ford was Indiana Jones. What happened was CBS wouldn't let Tom Selleck out of his contract because they had to start shooting the new season. And so we had nobody, and it was less than a month away. I think it was even less than that. And George Lucas said, let me call Harrison. And Harrison, I took the script over there, and Harrison was like, yeah, of course I'll do this. Okay, yeah, this is great. So so we did, oh gosh, 1, 2, 3. And in the meantime, there was a 3-month period where I said to Stephen and Kathy, well, I probably have some other things to go work on. And they said, oh yeah, we know you were going to work for your dad on used cars. Steven's the producer of that. So we've already worked that all out. You're going to be Bob Zemeckis' assistant and work for him. And then you'll also work for your dad. And so for 3 months, I got to, in between 1941 and Raiders of the Lost Ark, I went to Arizona, and we shot there for 3 months with Kurt Russell and tons of other incredibly cool people. And then I was exhausted because I'd been working nonstop for about 12, 14 months. And on location, we were shooting 6 days a week. And I did everything from Bob Zemeckis turned to me the first day and he said, oh, do you mind going and getting me a cup of coffee? And I said, yeah, are you crazy? I just worked on 1941. I did everything for a year. A cup of coffee for you, of course. And one night we shot during, they were shooting something else. And I had been awake during the day, helping my dad with cars. Cause the movie ends with a giant car chase across the desert with 100 cars. And that took months to plan. And then one night they were like, oh, the sound guy's sick. We don't have an extra sound guy because he's on shooting with the A team. Could you sit in the back of a car while we shoot this, do do this car pickup shots with the other two actors who aren't in the other scene. And so there I am at 3 o'clock in the morning, like with a walkie-talkie, and we're driving around with in a camera truck in front of us. And I'd have to say, go to the guys. And I'd been awake since 7 the previous morning. And I finally fell asleep and they're screaming and yelling, wake up, the scene's over. And I'm holding a little boom mic behind the two guys to record it. So I did all that and I was exhausted. And on Friday afternoon in January, gosh, I'm trying to remember what, 1980, I called it was called a building called the Egg Company, and it's where Lucasfilm was working out of in Universal City on the pre-production of Raiders. And I called Kathy Kennedy and I'm like, hi, I can barely stand up. I'm so tired. I know we're starting pre-production on Monday. It's the big day. And I said, could I just have one day off to sleep? And I've been gone for 3 months and I worked nonstop before that for 12 months. And she said, no, you have to be here. We're starting. You have to be here. You're a member of the team. You got to be here Monday morning to help move everything in Steven's office and blah, blah. It's like, okay, I'll be there. And so we did pre-production for months and months and in Los Angeles. And finally in June, we all flew to London, and which is one of my 2 or 3 favorite cities in the world. And I got to live there for 3 months in an apartment. Kathleen Kennedy and I shared an apartment, and sometimes other guests would come. And we had this giant, 4-bedroom apartment in London, and it was just fantastic. And we shot in a little town outside of London, EMI, Boreham Wood. And we did all the interiors there. And we shot there for about 2.5 months. And I was, Kathy by that point had become Steven's associate, and I was his assistant. And I was on set sometimes. I went to get him, and in the evenings, by the time we'd get home, sometimes I'd go see a play. Sometimes I brought my bike with me. I rode all over the city on the weekends. It was just phenomenal. And what people don't know when they watch the movie is a lot of those interiors that don't look like soundstage, like the whole sequence of the rolling ball, the scene that takes place in Nepal outside the bar, the entire climax of the movie where they're tied to the ropes with ropes, to the posts, and the Nazis are opening up the Ark of the Covenant, and all the lightning comes and the storms and the special effects, and Marion and Indy are tied to that post. Those were all done on gigantic sound stages in London. And then after that, we went to Africa, to Tunisia, Northern Africa, for a month and shot chase scenes and scenes in the bazaar. I got really sick while I was there, and almost ended up in the hospital and having to be flown back to London, but I got better. And so I finished that. And then I decided it had been at that point almost 2.5 years. I was still working. We moved, back to Los Angeles after the shoot, and we started working on pre-production for Poltergeist and E.T., which I had been around for all along. And I just decided, a friend of mine gave me some great advice and said, you wanted to be a writer. You're a really good writer. You're a good actor. Why don't you go back and do that again? There's lots of people who don't, they want to be somebody's assistant. She said, and this really great friend of mine, she was amazing. And she just said, you're exhausted all the time. She and I were having lunch, and she said, you won't even look me in the eye. What is going on? And I just said, well, I'm worried about this. And I got it Monday. I got to be here and there. And they had started having me read scripts for them, and sort of like I'd be in, well, we want you in the producers meeting. That's what we're going to groom you for. And I was just like, I don't want to do that. I want to go back and be an actor and a writer. And because on working on Raiders, I had to be there, or no, the previous one on 1941, I had to be there at 6 a.m. sometimes in a cold, dark office building, and nobody else got there till 8. So I just started writing plays and things early in the morning, and I'd had some people that wanted to do them. And so I went to Kathy and Steven and Frank Marshall, who was at that point came on board all of the Amblin Spielberg projects. And I just said, I'm going to go do what I want to do. And Steven and Kathy and Frank, everybody, George Lucas, everybody was wonderful. We were at MGM. We'd been there doing pre-production. And I was there when Poltergeist was thought of. when they wrote it. And I never gave it a second thought. The idea of being in a movie or something was so not in my consciousness at all. And when I left, they were all lovely to me, and I auditioned for a play within a week of leaving work, and I got one of the roles, a big role in a show, and I got a great review in the LA Times. And had gotten together with a bunch of people that I'd gone to college with, and we made a theater company, and they were going to produce my new play, the first play that I'd written. And out of the blue, one day, this phone call came from the casting director of Poltergeist. It was Fenton Feinberg, and Marcy Liroff was one of the contacts there. She's a wonderful human being. We're still friends all these years later. And they said, well, there was a role in Poltergeist, and we were looking for an Asian actor. And we couldn't find anybody that worked in the role that we liked. And Steven wants you to come read for it. And I was like, wow. I couldn't even believe that. So I we didn't have, I think back then the only thing we had was telexes. Obviously, we didn't have email, we didn't have smartphones. They sent me some sides because
Mhm.
I didn't even have a fax. I didn't have anything, and I practiced screaming in my car on the ride to the studio when I was going to audition, because I knew what the character did. I knew what happened, and so they put me on tape. And at the end of it, the casting people were like, "You're really good. Why did you spend 3 years being someone's assistant? You're a good actor." And I hadn't acted in 3 years since college, and but I'd been in a play for a while, and they said, no, that's really great. We're gonna send Steven the video, and I said, okay, and I didn't hear anything. And then a couple months later, I got an invitation to a very, very small private screening of Raiders. I think there were like 12 of us there, and I got there, and nobody else was there. I was by myself, and Steven pulled in, um, and he teasingly threw his car keys to me, because there was one point early on when I used to park his car at Lucasfilm, and and I said, "Where is everybody? Did I got the time wrong?" And he said, "No, no, no. I just wanted to see you. I haven't seen you for 4 or 5 months, and I just want to see how you were." And he said, "I heard you're in a play." And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Yeah, well, I knew about it. I read the review. That was great." And I said, "Thanks." And he said, "And now you're going to be in a film, I guess." And I said, "What? What are you talking about?" And he said, "Yeah, we cast you this week in Poltergeist, and I wanted to tell you myself to thank you, because I love, we worked together for 2.5 years. You got me through being in Africa and England, and he never got sick because he would only ate prepared, canned, and boxed food." And and in addition to that, you were the best one who auditioned of all the hundreds of people we saw. So there you go. And then I got to see Raiders of the Lost Ark, and that's how I got back into acting. And
Wow.
and uh, and after I did the film, it was so exciting. I'd never done a movie. I had to learn. Steven at one point had to pull me aside, and Toby Hooper, the director, was setting something else up, and Steven said, "You're acting for a theater. You need to stop." And I went, "Okay." He said, "Just remember what you did in the audition." And I said, "All right." He said, "The camera picks everything up. Just think all those things. Don't worry. Don't be loud. Don't do any of that stuff. Just," he said, "if you feel like you're whispering, you're probably not. You're all
Mhm.
hooked up to microphones and things like that." And I said, "Oh, okay. Got it. Got it." And I instantly understood what he meant. And the next take was great. And Steven said, "Yep, that's it. That's all. Just think it."
Mhm.
Like in the old play and movie, The Music Man, where he has the thinking system, where he's supposed to teach the kids how to play instruments in a band, and he doesn't know how to do that, and the kids don't know how to play, and he says, "Well, there's the think message method. You just think it." And that's what I did. I sat there, and while we're doing a scene, it's like the old Laurence Olivier joke about pretend. That's what acting is. You can study and mark up your script and all of that, but when you're there, you just have to sort of be that person and
Mhm.
think it. You have to think, what is she saying to me? And that sounds done. And as before, you sometimes when you see bad actors there, it's all very thought out, and
Yeah.
yeah, and nothing spontaneous, and it was fun. And after that, um, I had friends suddenly who were casting directors, and I got called out. I auditioned for some bigger roles in bigger films. I got a couple of them, and then the movie either got canceled or another film that I was supposed to be in, they were over budget and over schedule. So they cut what was a large supporting role into one line. And that was very disappointing. I got to the studio that morning to shoot this scene, and they sent the assistant director in to tell me, they last night all of this happened, and we didn't have time to tell you before you got here, and you're going to get your whole salary. I said, oh, thank you, and you'll get your billing and all of that, but there's only one line, and we don't know if you'd want to do it. I mean, you were a big co-star on this other film, and I said, no, I'll do it. I don't mind. No, I don't care. And that was a movie with Dudley Moore and Mary Tyler Moore called 6 Weeks, in which I was supposed to play his Senate campaign manager because he's running for the Senate in the movie. And I ended up being a guy in the background who went, "It's for you, sir." So, and after a while, I did that for about 5 or 6 years, little roles. Amazon Women on the Moon. I did some TV pilots. I did a kind of really silly ABC movie of the week, but Angie Dickinson was a star, and I thought, oh, this will be fun. And I had one scene with her where we had to walk through a cemetery. My entitled billing was Cemetery Man, and I had to give her in this one page of dialogue a very important clue that she used to track down this killer. And the guy said, you know what? Let's just rehearse this. The director went, we'll just rehearse this, okay? And I said, oh, all right. Yeah, let's do that. And Angie Dickinson and I had to make our way through a cemetery where there were like open flower holes in the ground, and we didn't even get to rehearse it. And we shot it once, and the guy looked at the two of us and went, okay, that was great.
Yeah.
And I'm like, are we going to do it for real? He said, we just did it for real. And Angie Dickinson was so sweet, Tiffany. And I since met her years later, at a birthday party for my dad. And she it turned out she knew my dad. And she turned to me when we shot this, and it was a terrible TV movie. And she looked at me at the end of the scene, and she said, you're very good. And I said, excuse me? And she said, that was great what you just did. She said, that was a really hard scene. That was a whole page of dialogue, and we had to walk through a cemetery while a camera was going along, side of us. And I said, oh, that means a lot to me. I loved you in movies since and I think I was 26 or something. And I said, I loved you since I was a kid. I loved you in all the like John Wayne Westerns and stuff. And she said, oh, thank you. And I said, you didn't have to say that. So I really appreciate you saying it.
Yeah.
And like 35 years later at a party for my dad, I went up and introduced myself to her. And I said, oh, it was a TV movie, and it was about a murder mystery, and you were running for some office, and then a dead body was found on your doorstep the morning that you were announcing your She goes, oh, A Hint of Scandal. That was an ABC movie. And I went, yeah, that was it. That was it. So, and I said, you don't know how much that meant to me that you told me I was good. I said,
Mhm.
you were Angie Dickinson. I was a guy who was a day player. I got like $500 for one day's work.
Yeah.
And I did RoboCop 2, and between that, and I got to work with Irv Kershner for one small little scene, and then a couple other things I went out for. Like I said earlier, there was a big movie at Fox that it was going to be a big co-starring role, and then the movie got canceled a couple weeks before it was supposed to shoot. And then I got a nice role on an episode of Murder, She Wrote. And I woke up that morning with laryngitis, and I could
Mm.
not make a sound. And they said, we're shooting this afternoon. We got to get somebody else. And I was like, can you do it tomorrow? And the lady goes, no, this is scheduled for this afternoon.
Oh, man.
So, and I was like, thank you. I'm so sorry. And she said, dude, it happens. And after that, I just went, I don't want to do this anymore. And
Yeah.
right around that time, I'd written 3 plays. I'd got hired to write a movie at Disney for Daniel Petrie Jr., who did Beverly Hills Cop. And I'd gotten another job to write a movie here. I pitched a story there. I sold something to HBO, a pilot for a series, a comedy series. And I just, I'd also gotten to the point, to be honest, and I know I've just talked for a very long time, but that's part of it is that life is crazy and odd and wonderful. And
Mhm.
sometimes there is no one track. You don't, things always don't work out the way you think they're going to, or sometimes they work out even better. Like
Yeah.
5 months after you leave a job, you quit a job with the most famous movie director in the world that, under other circumstances, somebody might have blackballed me or said,
Yeah.
we're not going to, we're going to make sure nobody ever hires you. They were lovely. And then they gave me a role in a movie that I still get residuals for 44 years later. I still
Wow.
get residuals. So, and it was a pleasure. And I got to the point with acting that I always hated learning lines. I hated learning lines when I was in plays in high school, when I was in college. I just hated it. And
Mhm.
and then I finally got to the point where I was like, I just don't want to do that. And then by that point, I was getting jobs writing movies and things. So, and having my plays done. And then I finally ended up moving to New York, where I had several plays done off Broadway, and all over the world. So
Yeah.
that's how lives work sometimes, like a career. You're never quite sure. I just honestly, and I don't know if I told you this when we met before, but I don't have that drive that many actors do.
Yeah.
That's no matter what thing. I can't be that guy that goes to 5 auditions in a day. That's not who I am. I'm in
Mhm.
awe of people that can do that. And I've sat now on the other side for 40 years as a playwright, and I don't, honest to God, don't know how actors do it.
Yeah.
I just don't. I don't know how they just walk into a room and shake hands and smile with a bunch of people and then just rip their guts out and cry or laugh or dance or sing a song or like I said, I'm in awe of them. So,
Yeah.
so there you go.
Same. Me too.
Yeah.
First of all, Marty, you have a really good memory to remember all of that. Like, I barely remember what I did last year.
Well, thanks. It meant all of it meant a lot to me.
Yeah.
I realized how lucky I was. All every step. I mean, I didn't have any other friends who got to go live in Tunisia in 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 a giant hotel that looked like a palace out in the middle of the desert. You
Yeah.
know, and all those things meant so much to me. I mean, even the detail of, I like I said, I brought my bike with me to London in 1980, and on my 2 days off on the weekends, I would ride my bike around and go to little really cool places and thrift shops and markets and things like that. I enjoy life. I like life. There's mm, I like to just, what is it used to say on the ABC World of Sports or whatever, it was like the gusto, go for the gusto. Maybe that was a
Yeah.
beer commercial. But there's a lot of things in the world to see and experience, and I've been really lucky to be able to do that. And a lot of the
Mhm.
reason is that I go, oh, well, I think I'll do this. Or when I sold my first big script to Disney, I took 2 months off after I wrote the script and got a Eurail pass and one piece of luggage in a backpack and went all over Europe for 2 months by myself.
Wow.
So, because I wanted to see the world, I wanted to see things, I wanted to
Mhm.
experience things, I wanted to know what it was like. So many writers, and I don't mean, I'm not dishing on writers. I'm going to rephrase this. I've met a lot. I've met several writers. I met some people who they only know movies, um, and they don't go out and experience things in the world.
Mhm.
And I've always tried to do that and have experiences. I want to know what it's like to get off a train in a train station in some little town in Italy and have to try to make myself understood at a desk to try to get a room for the night. Now,
Mhm.
I mean, now all of our experiences, I'm going to sound like an old guy right now, but now so much is on our phone that you don't have to do any of that anymore. You can land at an airport, you can go on your app, book a car, and book the next 3 nights in 3 different hotel rooms. And when I did that earlier, when I was younger, I was in my 20s. None of that was possible. You had
Mhm.
got to a train station somewhere in Italy, and there was a lady sitting at a desk with a phone that was plugged in somewhere in a Rolodex with a
Mhm.
list of all the motels and hotels and tourist places and things nearby, and you go up and try to make yourself understood. And those are the kind of things that I think as a writer that you need to experience. You need to. I told you that one story where in Africa I
Yeah.
had to drive through the desert at night in an open Jeep out for 20 miles
Mhm.
on a sand road to go from the big hotel to the small hotel and out in the middle of nowhere. And
Yeah.
I think to be a good writer or a good actor, I think you need to experience all those things. It's
Mhm.
you can, as Lawrence Olivier said, pretend, but at the same time, especially if you're a writer, I think you need to know what things are like.
Okay, I have to circle back to the beginning because I wanted to ask you about how you said your dad was in the industry first, and that was kind of how you started working for him. So,
Yeah.
with having a family member in the industry, did you ever feel pressure to get into it because your dad was into it?
It wasn't just my dad. My uncle was also. My dad was what's called. Oh, so having a momentary lapse here. Uh, my dad oversaw all the cars.
Mhm.
He did all of that, and transportation coordinator. There we go. It
Okay.
usually comes back. My dad was the very first guy in the movie industry to have a credit that said transportation coordinator and got a single card. And I
Uh-huh.
believe that was on used cars because the movie was all about cars. So, and my uncle was a transportation coordinator. He only just retired a couple years ago. Um, my sister, my stepmother were both travel people in the movie industries for big agencies and for studios. My other sister is a teamster and drives on movie sets and locations. So I never felt pressured to do that. What I was pressured to do was by my dad was not to be an actor. He tried
Okay.
to warn me. He said actors have no unless you're, Meryl Streep or Ryan Gosling or Margot Robbie, but they don't have any power most of the time. You have to shuffle from audition to audition. My dad seemed to think that writers had all the power. And my dad didn't know that in Hollywood, even now, still writers are like Kleenex. If they fire you, there's 47,000 other writers waiting that
Yeah.
they can hire you. The joke about everybody in LA having a script is true. It was true when I was growing up. Now everybody in the world has a script.
Right.
Um, so I was sort of told, "Don't be an actor. You'll never make any money. You won't do this. You don't look like." I'm trying to think of famous movie, Robert Redford or whatever, that actors. And and my dad just said, Please don't do that. Don't do that. It's going to be a waste of time. You have to have a salary." So it was almost the opposite. And
Okay.
that's why he spent that time teaching me how to work in the transportation end, how to run a transportation office, how to deal with, we called it then, sometimes they still call it that, like a doghouse where you have a bunch of Teamster drivers waiting. And I'd make up little cards and go pick up John Belushi at the hotel and take so-and-so, take Tree Williams somewhere. And he taught me all those skills. He taught me how to be super, super organized. And that's why when 1941 stopped shooting the principal photography, my dad went to the assistant director and said, "Can you teach him how to be assistant director? There's a program in the Directors Guild where you work so many hours." He goes, "Those kind of people always have jobs.
Mhm.
Assistant directors always have jobs, and there aren't that many of them." So no, it's funny, there was no pressure just to stay in the business. He just said, "Do the part of the business where your skills are going to be used." That was where the pressure came from.
Okay.
I used to say to people, if you work for a family business, you learn how to be organized, you learn how to be honest, and you learn how to bring always. I know everybody uses the expression now about bringing the receipts, which means something else now, but that was one of the very first things we learned working in our family business. If you went out and did a day load of errands, and it came in very handy working in
Mhm.
film production, because I would
Yeah.
walk in there with a stack this high of, here's all the receipts. They have all the information written on them, where it was, how much I paid. Here's the credit card stubs, and so
So do you have, nieces and nephews that are in the industry? Like, has that passed on in your family?
no, no.
No?
We make a joke about my two nephews, that my what I call my, I guess, my blood nephew, my two nephews that come from my siblings. I have lots and lots of other nieces and nephews from relationships and all sorts of things like that. My two nephews, my brother and I make jokes that my dad, who passed away a couple years ago, but as a grandfather, my dad finally got the sons he wanted, because one of my nephews is a doctor and the other one's a lawyer.
Oh,
And
wow.
the other one isn't even an entertainment lawyer. Both of them wanted absolutely nothing to do with the entertainment business
Really?
in any way, shape, or form. My nephew did, when he was in law school. He interned. My sister still works for Spielberg and Geffen and Katzenberg, and does all their transportation, and anything that does with moving people around, which is funny in a way, because that's what my dad started with. And my nephew spent his summers off working at Amblin,
Mhm.
Spielberg's company, because his mom worked for him. And so my nephew spent his summers, having to read all the mail at Amblin in the mail room, and then follow up with legal things of, they'd get emails or letters from people saying, "Oh, I wrote ET and I'm going to sue you." So my nephew had learned in law school how to deal with all that kind of stuff, and,
Yeah.
and answer that. So that was the closest he ever came.
That's so interesting. I always feel like usually when you have someone like that, like your dad, then it'll go down through the generations, and then it's like everybody in the family is in the industry.
Yeah. Well, we had two generations, and that was enough. Oh, my brother, I left my brother out of all this. My brother he directed in theater. He directed in film on the Disney Channel. He directed a couple TV movies for them. My brother, how could I have left my brother out? My brother went on to, in addition to theater director, he was also a casting director. And
Okay.
my brother has this genius talent, especially when it comes to kids.
Mhm.
And my brother was the casting director. He was he was associate, but he was the one who actually did the talent searches for the new Mouseketeers 30 years ago. And my brother discovered Christina Aguilera. Uh,
Really?
yes, Ryan Gosling, Kerry Russell, who's the really oh, excuse me, JT, Justin Timberlake,
Mhm.
a
Britney
couple of
Spears?
Britney Spears, and a couple of the guys who went on to do NSYNC. Uh,
Wow.
yeah, so my brother discovered all those people, and he's still in contact with many of them. He always used to go to the Britney Spears and Justin Timberlake concerts,
Uh-huh.
and get to sit up in boxes close to the stage, and then go backstage afterwards.
That's crazy.
Yeah, he's a lot. He had an extraordinary talent finding kids,
Mhm.
and he was a brilliant. He doesn't do any of that anymore. He just got away from it, but he was a brilliant theater director. He just, like, the theater shows. I worked with him on two theater shows, and they were both just phenomenal. He's a genius at directing theater, especially musical theater. He
Yeah. Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah,
Um, and then I wanted to go back to when you were talking about, being present for when Steven Spielberg was writing Poltergeist, and
yeah.
so you were there for the whole thing. So did Steven ever talk about where the idea came from and how that came about? Because I guess for me, I was thinking about the film, and I feel like when you strip away the paranormal aspect of it and the fear factor of it, that it's really, like, sad because this family is, like, lost this child, and especially for the mom, I think it was like I mean, you could see, like, the desperation and, like, the helplessness of just wanting to get her child back, and I was like, "Where did that come from?" Like, is this was there something going on in his life for him to come up with something like that?
I don't know. I mean, I think if you see The Fabelmans, his movie, The Fabelmans, you see that he had a very challenging childhood.
Mhm.
he grew up with three sisters that he really loved. He loved his dad. He loved his mom. His parents got divorced. He stayed very, very close to both of his parents. I mean, his dad was 103 when he passed away a few years ago.
Wow.
I knew his mom really well because Stephen would send me over to her restaurant. She later on, you don't see this in the Fablemans, but his mom ran a very, very well-known kosher restaurant in Beverly Hills. And sometimes Stephen would send me there for food, or he'd, say, "Oh, I bought my mom a present. Would you go drop it off or whatever?" And it was so funny because when the movie came out, there were a lot of people, they had disagreements with the casting of Michelle Williams because she's pretty waspy. She's not like the Jewish mom that his real mom was.
Mhm.
And when I saw the movie, I was like, she captured his mother perfectly.
Mhm.
I knew his mother pretty well, and that was the woman I knew. And so
Yeah.
I was so surprised. I actually defended that sometimes at dinners and things. I would say, I don't know, guys, she she played the role perfectly as far as I was concerned. But he did have a difficult childhood, and I think a
Mhm.
lot of that went into it. And it's interesting you said that, Tiffany, because I never thought of it that way before. But it's almost like, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, but it's almost like one of those Liam Neeson Taken movies or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very
Yeah.
serious. If that had been it's basically a kidnapping movie
Yeah,
with
yeah.
special effects and
Yeah.
paranormal special effects. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
and I think it's funny. I know a lot of the background of ET. With Poltergeist, strangely enough, I somehow wasn't around a lot for that one.
Mhm.
E.T., I was there from the very beginning, when it was originally called Night Skies, and another guy was gonna direct it, and it was a very, very serious, violent film that
Ooh,
was not for children. And
wow.
it was about, I'm gonna get this wrong. It was something close to this, that some ET got lost, and he was coming to protect the world from something, and two extraterrestrial people or civilizations were fighting. All I know is that it was a very, very serious film,
Mhm.
and and then it evolved over time into more along the lines of a I don't want to say a kids movie because that was the sort of
It was more wholesome.
yeah, yeah, and it was a family film, but I
Yeah.
mean, the the reason Columbia sold the rights to Universal was because they were like, "This is a kids movie. No one's going to go see this." So, but there
Yeah.
I
I
was there
mean,
during the development. Stephen and Melissa Matheson, who wrote the screenplay for ET, spent hours, days, weeks talking about it and talking about childhood and what it's like. I just know that he wanted to make a fun, scary sort of haunted house movie.
yeah.
So, but when you look at it, it's so similar in a way. It's almost like an X-ray of ET, as
Yeah.
opposed to they find someone that's lost and the other one is about a child that's kidnapped. So
Yeah.
they almost could fit together like a puzzle.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Did I
yeah.
tell you I talked to, Dee Wallace when sh at the con?
You did?
Yeah, she's very sweet. She signed my ET poster.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, and because she had, she had, like, her other pictures up front, and she had pictures of the movie Critters, and I was like, "That movie scared me as a kid, like, it gave me nightmares," and I told her that, and she's like, "That movie was so fun," and I'm like, "It wasn't fun for me, it scared me." Yeah, but she was very sweet, yeah.
What's it about?
Critters? You never
Yeah.
seen it?
No, I've
It's
never
like
seen it.
it's almost like Gremlins, but like horror. So
Oh,
it's like they're like these like little fur like evil fur balls, and they have like red eyes, and they like attack people. And
oh.
so I watched that at a young age, and I shouldn't have watched it with my cousin, and I was like really scared after watching that.
Well, I asked because this is my little secret about that often comes up, and and sometimes fans don't understand, and most of the time they laugh. I'm not a horror film fan. I
Yeah.
can't stand violence, especially if it involves sharp things like
Mhm.
knives or
I think you
swords.
told me that, yeah.
Yeah, I can't. I just can't watch them. And I
Yeah.
sat down because I had to do another talk about horror films. And I think, I saw The Exorcist and I saw The Omen, and I saw John Carpenter's The Fog, and I saw some other John Carpenter movie that and it was just, and as soon as I sat there in the fog, and all of a sudden, whatever the things were that came out of the fog, they all had those horrible knives, and I was just like, yeah, I can't.
Yeah.
People getting disemboweled, and that just no.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm always fascinated by horror fans of
Uh-huh.
what is it? Tell me from your point of view, what is it that makes
Well, I mean, I don't
people
know if I'm the
horror?
best person to ask because I still get scared even now. But I really, when I was younger, I would get really scared. I couldn't really watch horror movies, so I really haven't gotten into it until now as an adult. And I
Okay.
think maybe I'm able to appreciate maybe like how the film was made and what went into it more so than the horror of it. So I think watching those movies, I can go like, wow, that was really interesting. I wonder how they did that. So
Yeah.
that's interesting to me more so than focusing on like the gore because there's still some movies where I'm like, I'm not watching that. Like I can't get into like the Saw franchise. Like that stuff is like too a little bit too much for me.
You know what? You've made me realize something now, which is I think I've been calling them all by the wrong names, which is I think between horror. Also, I love the movie. I don't know if you've ever seen it. Um, uh, uh, The Haunting, which is an incredible movie, 1963 with Julie
Okay,
Harris,
wait.
the black and white, and they go stay in a haunted house somewhere, and oh, it's fantastic.
Wait, I have to tell you okay, I've never seen the original, but
Okay,
the remake they did in the 90s
yeah,
traumatized me.
yeah.
I seen that as a kid and that
Oh,
traumatized
watch
me.
you may not be the thing that's so brilliant and scary about the original Haunting is that you just never see anything. It's
Yeah.
the house. It's not a person or a and I think I should need to write my friend Christopher, who's a horror film fan and he writes about it and is an expert, which is I think there's a big difference between maybe horror films and slasher films.
Yeah.
And I think that to me, like Saw or Hostel or Friday
Yeah.
the 13th or any of those things where kids get killed off one by Final Destination. And
Yep.
I always think all
Yeah.
of those Halloween, all of those films, the very first one in all of those series always tends to be pretty intelligent and pretty smart. And usually they do have some humor to them. And
Uh-huh.
and they're super scary. And 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 then you can sort of see the life sort of dribbles out of them, I
Yeah.
guess, which is by the time you get to like Halloween 12 or something, and then same
Yeah.
once in a while. But I loved Psycho as a kid. That's a horror film. And when I was a kid, while you were describing Critters, you made me think of three horror films I saw that were from the early 70s, um, where there was some violence, but I mean, and full disclosure, I did see Night of the Living Dead, the original black and white
Mhm.
one. Yes, I have seen that. But
Mhm.
those the three films I saw when I was a kid that were just kind of horror. One was called um, The Other, which was about these two twins who had this crazy cool power, and that one ended up the climax of somebody ended up being impaled on a pitchfork. That was about as much as I could stand. The other one was called they Who Slew Auntie Rue, and that had like famous people in it. And then there was another one with Debbie Reynolds and Shelley Winters called What's the Matter with Helen? And those were kind of horror, like
Mhm.
scary horror films. But I mean, like when the original Omen came out, no one had ever seen a movie like that with
Mhm.
those kind of horrific, violent deaths, one after another, with big
Yeah.
Oscar winning stars in them that were really super well made. I mean, The Omen's a really well made, wonderful movie. The original. Now there's 7 sequels or something, but
Yeah.
yeah. And the original Exorcist was just I waited in the line. I think I told you that before. I waited in line 8 hours. My friends and I. It was playing at one theater. It played in one movie theater, one giant 3,000 seat movie theater in Los Angeles. And we went there 10 o'clock in the morning, and the first tickets we could get were for 8 that night.
Wow.
And we waited in line in the rain. So anyway, sorry that we got off track there, but
No, that's fine,
yeah,
yeah. Because I think I told you too that I like the one of the movies that I did like as a kid was Scream, and so that's I've kind of followed the franchise, but that's a slasher though, so that's pretty like, I mean, as they've gone on with each movie, it's gotten pretty, like, more gory, like, by the 6th one, it's like I mean, it's really like they're stabbing people in the face and everything, and like
Right.
it's bad. But I really like the first one because, like you said, to your point, that there was a little bit of humor there, and then they went on to do like a parody about it for Scary Movie. So that was something I kind of related to because I was like, oh, this is funny. Like this is kind of funny. But yeah, so there are certain movies that I can deal with the gore, and then there's some where I'm like, that's a little bit too much for me.
Yeah. But Scream also had, as I think I never saw it, but I saw lots of clips from it.
Yeah,
And so I don't have an opinion about the movie itself. I haven't seen it. But what my understanding is that as gory as it is, it's also really clever and funny.
it
And
is.
you sort of catch yourself laughing in spite of yourself.
It's kind of like meta, like where the characters pretty much know they're in a horror film, kind of,
Yeah.
because Jamie Kennedy is in the first and the second one. And in the first one, he's kind of like the film buff, so he's like, this is what you don't do in a horror movie. Like you don't, you don't drink, you don't have sex, you don't walk off by yourself, and that's what they do in the film. So it's kind of like funny like that. And then what's funny about it too is Ghostface is really, especially in the first one, he's very human. So like Michael Myers and a lot of the other, like Freddy Krueger, like those beings you can't kill very easily, but Ghostface is very much like he's getting hit in the face, like he's falling down the stairs, like they're fighting him back. And I think that's kind of, again, like the humor of it, and it kind of makes it a little bit not as scary.
Right.
But and then it's a teenager that's killing people, that he's like in high school doing it. So I think maybe that's a big difference between some of the other big horror movies. But yeah, that franchise I've followed for as long as they've been making movies. Yeah,
Hmm. Okay.
you should watch the first one.
I should. I have to tell you, I started watching it one night, and it's the famous thing that they steal from Psycho. Only Drew Barrymore, is only there for 10 minutes or something like
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
and goes to the first half hour of Psycho with Janet Leigh. And I got through about 4 minutes, and as soon as like the phone rang or whatever, and the whole thing about he's in the house, and I just went, no, can't, because it's sharp stuff. I can watch stuff with guns, or that's why I can't watch people being tortured, or it just,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't want to see people's insides falling out and all that
Oh,
kind of
yeah, that's like in the opening scene. Yeah.
Yeah,
Not
right.
not with her, but with, her boyfriend. They have her boyfriend tied up to a chair outside, and he's, like, on the phone asking her questions, like horror movie questions, and he's basically like, "If you get it right, then I'll let your boyfriend go," but we know he doesn't actually do that. And he's like, and so she's, like, answering the questions, and I think one of them is, I'm trying to remember. He asked her a question and she gets it wrong. And he's like, "Oh, that's the wrong answer." And then you see the boyfriend and his guts are like all
Right,
like, yeah.
right.
So yeah, that part is kind of
You just answered a question that I had for a long time about Scream, because I always thought it was, because I'd always heard that somebody sort of got disemboweled in the beginning, and I just assumed that it was Drew Barrymore, but
no,
no.
well, she does get killed. She does get stabbed. And then they hang her up. But they don't show all of that. It's more so with the boyfriend because he's strapped to the chair, and then they show. I don't think they really show it when he gets like stabbed, but you see it, like
The
So
result.
that,
Yeah.
yeah, so you see
Yeah. Oh, well.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
Just try to watch the first one. I think you'll enjoy the first one. I don't know if you would care for the sequels, but the first one was pretty good.
I always think that they come up, the writers, whoever, usually it's a writer that comes up with that. But I always thought those Final Destination movies, I thought, oh, what a clever idea, which is those people somehow escape death, so death has to come find them, right?
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah.
sort of the premise of Final Destination, the very
Yeah.
first
I've
one?
seen like maybe the first two. The first one scared me too.
Yeah.
I haven't said there's like ton of sequels, but I haven't seen.
Yeah. See,
Yeah.
that's why I'm fascinated by people who love horror films and stuff, because my way of looking at it is that there's so much bad things in the world, and life is often scary enough as it is. And like having a job, or
Yeah.
making a living, or looking after your family, that I don't, the idea of going somewhere and watching people being stabbed and shot and
Yeah.
decapitated, and I'm always astonished that I made it through the very original Omen movie. It was,
Mhm.
and I have not seen it since, and I never saw any of the sequels, but there was something that it was just so shocking in whatever 1973, whatever year it was, 74, that you're watching, and all these famous people was like, oh, oh, the lightning struck the top of the church and the spire came down and impaled this famous actor. Oh, and
Mhm.
the other guy's driving his car, chasing somebody, and he gets behind the truck with the panes of glass. And oh, one pane of glass gets loose and flies off and decapitates him. And
Yeah.
you just haven't seen things like that in a movie. You
Yeah.
just in a big mainstream movie with famous people in it. It was just so yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I think the other part of it for me is, like, the storytelling because there's usually something really emotional at the root of the story. So, like, for the killer or whatever, you're like, "Why are they like this? What happened to make them like this?" And yeah, I think for me, it's more so, like, the storytelling and then kind of the technical parts of it, more so than enjoying the gore. There's some people who really just enjoy the gore, and I'm not
Yes.
one of those people, yeah.
Yeah, some people just like that.
Yeah.
Um, I'll
And
try.
then
I'll try to watch Scream. I'll do that for you.
yes, try to watch and then tell me if you like it or not.
Okay.
You can be honest if you don't like it, it's fine.
Well, I'll just one last thought here is we were talking earlier. There's a podcast I love that Brett Goldstein from Ted Lasso does called Films to be Buried with. And he always asks 10 questions. It's about an
Mhm,
hour long and it's fascinating. And one of them always is, what's the scariest movie you've ever seen?
mhm.
And I always try to every week when I listen to it, I always run through, oh, do they change? Are they my favorites? Which ones? And I always think about the scariest movie I've ever seen, and can say what it is, which is I think it was the original Alien.
Oh, I watched that, last year.
Yeah, and
Yeah, for the
I
first
saw
time.
it in a giant movie theater, single screen movie theater in Hollywood, one of the old giant movie palaces with a spectacular giant, it was in 70 millimeter wraparound screen with all this stereo coming at you. And I got to a point in that movie where I took off my glasses and I put them in my pocket. I put my hands over my ears and I put my head. I was so scared.
Oh.
I didn't want to watch it anymore. I didn't want to hear it, and I didn't want to watch it. I don't like being scared, and
Yeah.
I made it through
Uh-huh.
Alien, and then Aliens, the sequel.
I haven't seen the sequel, but
You
I
know
saw the
what? The
first one, yeah.
sequel is a James Cameron movie, and it's just fun. It's fun and scary and terrifying, but it's more like a haunted house ride than
Okay.
than gory grossness and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that I mean, to sit in a movie theater when the very first Alien came out and they had kept the little creature popping out a secret, and when
Yeah.
that happened in the movie theater, to be in a movie theater and not know, because I went the first weekend, and to hear 2,000 people scream, just
Yeah.
scream. Like, we those are sort of this is gonna sound weird. Those are things that kind of don't happen anymore, like, in terms of I wanna say I'm being a little sarcastic about building community or something. It's sort of like those experiences that we tend not to have anymore because whether we don't go to the movies or we watch them on our phone or,
Yeah.
you watch them on your iPad late at night, and to I did an interview a couple weeks ago with a guy who's writing a book about Spielberg and a couple other famous directors in the late 70s and early 80s. And he brought that subject matter up, which was that's something we've almost lost.
Yeah.
And that's what was so exciting last year about the movie Barbie, which was to go in the
Uh-huh.
movie theater and sit with 700 or 800 people or a
Mhm.
thousand in a big, even at a multiplex, being in the largest one and watching all those people react to everything in the movie
Mhm.
and laugh, and some people were singing along, and at one point, some people got up and started dancing, and
Yeah.
I just thought, "Oh, yeah, I miss this." Oppenheimer, I know we've joined them together now in our heads, but Oppenheimer was the same. I saw it here in a 700-seat theater, and for 3 hours, no one moved.
Mhm.
No child cried, no one got out their phones. They were just that experience that and I know in a way, a lot of those I'll say the slasher ones, My Bloody Valentine, that was another one in the '70s when the slasher stuff started, and
Yeah.
Hellraiser, I think, was the British
Oh, yeah, that scared me.
Pinhead, right? Yeah, and
Yeah.
those became I mean, well, I taught school for a while in New York City. While I was there, I taught a writing class once a week at a really cool school, the, Harvey Milk School, which is for LGBTQ kids who are also at risk, and the first thing we did every Wednesday is I'd say, "Oh, Tell me what you saw. Tell me what movie you saw. Did any of you go see a play? Tell me a song you like that you heard, that you downloaded, that, you know, maybe was on the radio. If you have a radio, if you know what that is. Um, you know, because these kids were 12 and 13 and 14. They were like, they would say things to me like, well, what did you carry your music around with? And I'm like, well, we didn't carry it around on an iPod or a pad and we didn't have Walkman until 1980. And before you'd have a little tiny transistor radio that was like that. And it was a guy,
Yeah.
well, couldn't you just listen to it on your computer? And I remember saying to the kids in the class, when I was a kid your age, I felt like I was 100 years old. But
Yeah.
it was like I'd say, well, computers were kind of the size of this room when I
Uh-huh.
was your age. So that sense, that was something that this guy who interviewed me a couple weeks ago, that sense of experiencing that with 1,000 people, or in really big movie palaces where there are 2,000 people there and you're experiencing something, whether it is Halloween or Friday the 13th, or it's Greece. It's, you know,
Yeah.
John Travolta dancing around in Greece, and experiencing that with 2,000 people was just, it was a joy. It was one of the great things
Mhm.
about, you know, when movie theaters were still giant theaters. So
Yeah.
I don't know how we got on that, but there you go.
I know. I'm sorry, we're going all over the place here.
Oh, I hope that's okay.
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
But since we're talking about movies, I did wanna ask you because I know you said before, that you know, you like the way movies were done back then compared to now. So where do you see filmmaking, like, within the next 10 years? Like, where do you think it's gonna go? Do you think we'll ever revert back to doing, like, old techniques, or you think because technology is advancing so fast that that's just where we're headed?
I I am given hope by, I will answer that in a roundabout way. There are certain film directors now that want to go back and shoot on film again, not digitally.
Mhm.
They don't want to use, there are certain directors that won't use CGI now for special effects.
Yeah.
I hear this. You and I talked about this. I've talked to so many people at, whether it's a horror convention or it's just a regular Comic-Con, people are tired of CGI. They're tired of movies looking like, I love animated films, but
Mhm.
we got to the point of the last bunch of Marvel movies, and they look like you were watching animation most of the time. Uh,
Yeah.
and I don't know where they're going to go. I think that I want to say the democratization of filmmaking. So now anybody with an iPhone can make a movie. One of
Mhm.
the best movies I've seen in the last 10 years. Oh, darn it. I'm not going to be able to remember the name of it. It was made on an iPhone in Hollywood. It's about two transgender women hanging out on Christmas Eve in Hollywood. And it is Tangerine. It's called Tangerine.
I think I've heard of that.
Oh, watch it, rent it tonight. It is,
Okay.
you may be bored out of your mind, but the idea that not only did this person who made the film make it with their iPhone, they went to Panavision, which makes cameras and lenses, and
Mhm.
said, "Could you make a special anamorphic lens?" Because the person who made the film wanted it to be in widescreen.
Uh-huh.
He I think it was a he. He said, can you make a lens for me that will snap onto my iPhone so I can shoot the entire film? And they said, absolutely. And when you watch this movie now, a lot of it was improvised, and
Mhm.
it's just one of the most wonderful, exhilarating films I've ever seen, about these two trans women on Christmas Eve, and they're both sex workers, and they both have fallen in love with other people, and you follow them for
Mhm.
2 hours, and it was exhilarating. That was the only way
Mhm.
I could describe it. I actually went to a movie theater and saw it, and I thought, "This is,"
Oh, that's cool.
and I like that about films, that anybody can make a film now. I think that really is exciting, and yet at the same time, um, sometimes I am afraid that the whole future of films is gonna be 360-degree LED screens
Mhm.
and green screens and whatever is next. I mean, it's LED things now, and people like James Cameron and I'm trying to think of the other people that are real experimenters and movers in that well, Peter Jackson. I love Lord of the Rings, the first trilogy. It's one of my favorites. And 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 then by the time he got to the Hobbit movies, he was more concerned about shooting the film at high speed, and it looked like it looked like a video from 1973. It just was weird.
Yeah.
So there's all these things, and sometimes I don't know what purpose some of those things serve,
Mhm.
like shooting things in high def. All it does is make it so that the actors have to wear more makeup and sets look flimsy and crappy. Uh,
Yeah.
and yeah, and you can see the pores in people's faces and stuff. And I don't
Yeah.
that you know I don't know. I don't know what the future is going to be. I do like the idea that anybody can make a film now. I don't know what that does to people who are professionals.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know what that does to the art of there's an art to cinematography, where the camera is, how it's placed, how it moves, how you use it, and maybe I think we've gone through a whole phase where people went to film school as
Mhm.
opposed to in earlier cinema, 30s, 40s, and 50s, people didn't go to film school. People lived lives and made films and did that. So I don't know. We're in a very odd place now.
Yeah.
I don't even know if there will be movies. As long as we have um, people like James Cameron and
Yeah.
yeah, that we will. So yeah, I'm a giant fan of Titanic. What can I tell you?
Oh, yeah, I think everybody
Yeah,
like
everybody. I think it's inside everybody is, and those are the kind of things I was like, really, go make another movie that's different and pushes boundaries as opposed to making another Avatar sequel. I don't.
okay, well, I hate to break it to you, but he's doing another Avatar
Oh,
movie.
he's doing like six.
Yeah.
They're going to come out every 3 years, and
I'm
I'm like,
not gonna lie, I actually really like the Avatar movies, though. I
I
think that
love the first
I
one.
love the story, like the story of the family. I think it's
Yeah,
really emotional.
and that's what he did with the second one. It did.
Yeah.
It's all about family and different groups and things like that. I don't know. Maybe I should have seen it in a movie theater. But
Yeah.
I
Yeah, I
saw
actually
it.
saw the second one in the theater. It's pretty good.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
No,
I think it's more fit for a theater than watching it at home for sure.
yeah, it was hard to watch it at home. I was
Yeah.
thinking, "Oh, this would have looked really good in giant, like, IMAX."
Yeah, there's a movie I wanna recommend to you. I don't know if you'll like it or not, but I it's like one of the best movies I saw last year. Um, it's a filmmaker named David Lieben, and he's a independent filmmaker. I actually had him on the podcast last year, and he did a film called Publish or Perish, and I thought that movie was so great. And it's about a professor who is working towards tenure, and he's like desperate for it, and he ends up having this really horrible accident where he backs up and he hits a student and he kills the student.
Oh,
And so pretty much the whole movie he's like trying to hide that, and as he's trying to hide that and he's lying about things, other things start happening, and it's crazy. It kind of takes you on a ride, but it's such a good movie, and I was like, I would have never known about this movie had I not, spoke with him and interviewed him. So that's one of the movies I like to tell people. I think it's on Amazon Prime. I think
okay,
so. But yeah, that's one of the movies I really enjoyed.
okay. Yeah, I'll write that down. I'll watch it. Yeah, there's a film that I saw at the end of last year that I absolutely loved. I'm like lucky enough I've been in the Writers Guild for a long time, and they at the end of the year, because of awards and things, they send us lots of films, and they go to screenings and things. And there was a film I saw at the end of last year, Ava DuVernay made, called Origin. I'm going to lend my screener copy to a friend, but and it's she read these two books. This amazing writer, a nonfiction writer named Isabel Wilkerson, and the first book she wrote was about the called Warmth of a Thousand Suns, I think, and it was about the diaspora coming from the South, going up to the North, specifically in Chicago. And she's amazing how she weaves all these stories together. And then her book that came out called Cast 3 or 4 years ago, and Ava DuVernay read the books, and then she was like, "But I want to make a fiction version of what do I?" Oh, and then she came up with this amazing idea, which is she told the story of how the woman, this Isabel Wilkerson, how she had gone through these several tragedies piled on top of each other.
Hmm.
And then she wanted to write this story and she started doing research. And I've never seen, it sounds like the most boring film ever. Oh, it's about a woman doing research and this and that. And it all
Mhm.
has to do with not only slavery, but Germany in the 1930s and the caste system in India. And and she brings these with the film. She tells this woman's story of how she came to write it, how she actually wrote it, how the writing of this huge amount of research into this book helped her keep going in her life after these tragedies she experienced.
Mhm.
And in it, and then in the movie, the writer director does this amazing thing where she dramatizes the three main stories that were in the origin nonfiction book. It's one of the most unbelievably moving films I've ever seen. Um, and the last 20 minutes is so beautiful, it's almost unbearable, where all the stories start coming together,
Mhm.
including hers. So if you have a chance, it's rentable now. I think it's, you can rent it anywhere. I think it's on Amazon. And
Okay.
yeah, it's an astonishing movie. It was the most, to me, it was the most exciting movie I saw last year. That's the future of filmmaking. That's how I just answered your question. There you go.
Yeah.
I don't think that's where it's going.
Yeah.
I think it's possible to make political films, to make films about something. I mean, we've gone through this period of the last 20 years or so. I would say I don't want to beat up on Marvel movies. I love a whole bunch of them. I love, what are the ones I love? I love Black Panther. I love the very first Captain America. And but I think what happened after a while is they ended up challenging us in any way. They didn't.
Mhm.
They just ended up being almost about themselves. Those
Yeah.
movies, as opposed to questioning you or making you think. Which that's, to me, that's the future. To me, is people like Ava DuVernay making these movies that really challenge you, but are also super entertaining and beautifully acted and beautifully made. And I look back into the past, and so many of the films I grew up with, especially in the 70s, that I absolutely love, they were about something. They were challenging, but
Mhm.
they were also entertaining. And I think we've gotten away from the challenging, educational, informative, and entertaining, and now it's just giant special effects. And I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, I like movies that make me think.
Mhm.
And I don't lately. I haven't been able to get that very much. So that would be a nice way to face the future.
Yeah. I know you're not the only one though. I've heard a lot of disappointment around I guess the most recent Marvel movies. I haven't seen them, but I know a lot of people were kind of like, this isn't really great.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I mean, the last one I saw was, I can't remember the title. It was the one with the all Asian cast, something in the Five Magic Rings, or Shi Ching and the Five Magic Rings, and Aquafina was in it, and Michelle Yeoh, and all these other amazing performers. And I found the first hour, well, it's that pattern in Marvel movies, which is for that first hour and 15 or so minutes, there's a great chase scene. There's a runaway bus with that kung fu fight in the middle of San Francisco going up and down hills. Spectacular. Um, and it's great seeing people of color in a Marvel movie where they're the movie. They're the bad
Mhm.
guys and the good guys. And that was exciting. And and I was really having a really good time. And then, as I may have mentioned this to you when I saw you in Las Vegas, but all of a sudden, literally on clockwork, I looked at my watch. The movie had started at 8 o'clock, and at 9:15, I said to a friend, "Dragons flew out of a lake," and then the side of a mountain opened up, and thousands of dead people came out with swords, and I was just like, "Yeah, now it's that
Yeah.
movie again." So I, I don't know. I was very lucky to be. I started going to the movies in the 60s, in the mid 60s, late 60s, and the 70s. And some of those are just the greatest movies ever made. I think somebody asked me the other day what my five favorite movies were, and th- three of them I think were from like the mid 70s. Three are from the mid 70s. One's from the 1940s, and one, yeah, two are from the 40s and three are from the 70s. So yeah, I just love movies. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing to me that James Cameron does.
Yeah.
I want to jump on that James Cameron bandwagon after beating him up about Avatar.
Yeah.
Avatar and Titanic and Terminator and Aliens. And I'm sure there's two or three in there that I've missed. He makes movies that are exciting and entertaining. They
Mhm.
do make you think. I did not see Avatar in its first release because
Mhm.
I have problems with vertigo and getting dizzy, and so the idea of seeing something in 3D where things are going to be flying, I just went, yeah, I won't be watching that.
Yeah.
Um, and then I finally watched it on a plane on a little screen, and I had no idea until I started watching the plane that America was the bad guy, like the
Yeah.
American military were the bad guy. And I sat
Mhm.
up in my chair on the plane and went, wait a minute, this is the most successful movie made. It's the highest grossing movie of all time. And the American military is the bad guy? How
Yeah.
did that happen? How did he sell that to America, where the movie made like $700 million or 800, whatever it was?
Uh-huh.
And I thought back and I went, Titanic is completely about the class system.
Yeah.
Whether you're watching 1912
Mhm.
or sitting watching the movie in 1997 or now, watching it, and it's super entertaining, terrific acting in it, the sets and
Mhm.
costume, cinematography, but it's about the class system. Literally, we're watching who survives and who doesn't.
Yeah.
And even in the end, the the woman who comes from a higher class survives, and the guy who is, basically saved her, who was a working class guy, he dies in the water.
Yeah.
And Terminator's similar, and the Deep, that's not the Deep, Abyss, the Abyss. His movies make you think. You really,
Mhm.
especially Avatar. I was just knocked out by that, even on a little screen on the back seat of a plane. You know,
Yeah.
so there's my I'm sorry, James Cameron thing. So, but even and Oppenheimer, that astonishes me that that movie made $1 billion. 3 hour movie about the guy that invented the atomic bomb and his issues. It's
Yeah.
astounding that that movie was that successful.
Yeah.
Because and it's also astounding to me that a movie like Barbie, which was so fun and so entertaining and so funny, I saw it again on a plane a couple weeks ago, and I was just laughing out loud all the way through it. That it's all about like women's place in the world and
Yeah.
where do they belong. I mean, what's the song? What was I made for?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
At the end, I mean, and watching it again, I man, it took my breath away. I was like, this is the one of the most political movies ever made. It's astonishing, and it made 1.3 billion
I
dollars.
don't know, a lot. A
A
lot.
lot. And then it's all of a sudden it made me look back and look at the other two Greta Gerwig movies that I love so much. Little Women.
Oh, Little Women, I love that
Oh,
movie.
it's wonderful.
That's such a good movie. Oh my
And
goodness.
you know what she did? She took the novel, and then she took Louisa May Alcott's life, and she took incidences and things from Louisa May Alcott's life and put those so that they happened to Joe, Chef
Oh, okay.
in the film. And that movie's very powerful, and how she ends up that last scene where everybody's there and she's made all this money and she has a place for women. And the other third Greta Gerwig movie that I absolutely love is Lady Bird, and it's
Yeah.
a young woman who doesn't understand who she is or what she's doing or where she's going to go, or does she stay in this little town? Does she go to college? All of her friends are staying behind, but she knows she's different. She knows that, and her parents know she's different, and they've got to get her out of there. And how
Mhm.
she's totally a nerd and an outcast, and no one likes her, and yet it's super entertaining and makes you cry about 3 times. And
Mhm.
yeah, so
Yeah, I'm really proud of her. I think she's from Sacramento. That's my
yes,
hometown.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
your hometown.
Yeah.
All right, it
Yeah.
is.
I
It is
think
all.
she shot some, scenes from Lady Bird in
Yeah,
Sacramento, I think,
I
yeah.
think I think that's where it takes place, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
good
so that's
for
really
you.
cool.
Yay. Rice farmers.
Yeah.
Atlanta
Yeah.
rice farmers. What is it? The Lundgren rice or whatever? I only know that because my family spent a lot of time in Northern California, and,
Yeah.
drive through Sacramento and stuff. So
Yep, that's my hometown.
hometown. All right.
Mhm.
Were you
Yeah,
a nerd? Were you a nerd? You said a lot of the horror people are nerds. You feel that way?
I think so, yeah. I think some of the things I'm into that maybe, like, most people are kinda just like, "Okay, whatever," and I'm like, "It's exciting to me." Like, even be able to do stuff like this, I think some people are kinda just like, "Okay, whatever." Like, you're talking about movies, but I'm like, but movies, like, can really move you, you know what I'm saying? And so I think being able to have other people to talk to you about that kinda stuff, that's exciting to me, and to learn about how films are made and what really goes into it, because as the audience, we just see the end result. Like, we don't see all of the work that goes into it. So
No.
to me, that's fascinating.
You don't see those hours and hours. People audiences have no idea that
Yeah.
put the lights in the right place.
Yep.
They'll say, "You guys can all go to your dressing room for a while and go to your trailer. It's gonna take 4 hours to light this."
Yeah.
And I think now that's a little different. There's film that they or develop, not film, digital stuff is easier to light and things like that. But
Uh-huh.
yeah, it's all the stuff that you all don't see, like some of the Poltergeist stories I told you about. The steak is when it crawls across the counter.
Oh,
You know,
yeah, you gotta
my
tell
big
that story
scene-
again.
yeah, my big scene. That steak was it's a real steak when I take it out of the refrigerator, and then when I set it on the counter, when they cut back to it, it's a prop steak that's all made of plastic and this and that. And as I told you, the steak was on chopsticks that if you
Mhm.
look carefully, watch that scene, there's grout on the sink where the steak was. And when the steak comes alive in my fantasy or dream or real life, whatever that is, there's a guy underneath the counter with a pair of chopsticks, and they're sticking up through the grout into the steak. And that's how the steak inches along like a snake across the grout, and then it gets to a certain place, and I look at it, and then what they did was they had a big metal syringe that was filled with stuff that looked like gloop and kind of smushy Play-Doh and wet,
Mhm.
gunky stuff. And he had it all in a big syringe, and he pushed the syringe up like this. And the syringe was very carefully hidden in the steak. And so when he went like this, it pushed it all up and broke through the material that made it look like a top of a steak, and then it was maggots and crawly things. And yeah, that was a guy inside a kitchen cabinet going like this, and it's practical, and and it looks practical, but what it also does is it also looks often scary and gross, and with the music and the lighting, you're like, oh my god. And
Mhm.
those were really maggots on the floor that when I
Okay, I was gonna ask you that. Was that real?
spat out the chicken leg that I was chewing on, and all of a sudden I go, "Bleh," and I spit it out, and there's maggots all over the floor. Those were real maggots that they
Oh.
they had a guy who was a maggot maggot wrangler. That's hard to say, and because you can't hurt them. They're animals. They're
Yeah.
creatures, and I had to be super careful, and so did the camera guy, and because you couldn't hurt any of them, and he had them all in little containers, and he put them on the floor on the turkey leg or the chicken leg, and
Mhm.
and I had to stand back and look down like that. So, and
Oh.
when I went into and then I realized that I had some of the chicken leg still in my mouth, and I run into the bathroom and throw up. What they did was they filled my mouth with rice and water, and I
Mhm.
had to hold it in my mouth while they were setting everything up, so that when I ran over to the sink and threw up in the sink, you don't really see me throwing up. You see me sort of gagging and stuff, but you sort of see some stuff come out. And it was the rice, and the rice absorbed the water, and it looked like maggots by the time I spit it up into the sink. So that's all practical effects, which are kind of fun and cool. No green,
Yeah.
you know. The
I'm
only
like, how do they come up with this stuff? Like, who even thinks to do that?
brilliant special effects guys who, and they had a dummy made for me from my chest, actually my waist up, and they made it look just like me. They had a wig on, and then they had strings and wires so the eyes open and close and the mouth open and close, and underneath the skin, they embedded it with all this gunky, scary material that had blood, stage blood and this and that, and jello that was almost melted, and I didn't want to do that because it was very expensive. That dummy was very, very expensive, and they could only do it once. So Spielberg was on the set, so I gave him my shirt and my ring and my watch that I wear in the movie, and those are his hands reaching up. And when Toby Hooper yelled action, Steven just started pulling pieces of the face off, and they had guys with hot air blow dryers to sort of make it even gunkier and melty when he started doing that. And he pulled all that. He pulls the skin off. He got carried away. He was like grabbing hunks of bloody like jello and throwing it. And when people see it in the movie, they're like, people are so startled because there's nothing gross before that.
Yeah.
There's nothing violent or gross, and they're so sort of thrown off balance between the flashing lights and me looking and the screaming and the crying and the stuff going in the sink, and then it's over. I don't even think it lasts 20 seconds.
But it's like, to me, one of the most, if not the most memorable scene in that movie,
Yeah.
because it's so unexpected. And I was like, I thought this was a PG movie.
Yeah, you're not expecting it, and when it happened, people just like, it's kind of like the alien popping out in Aliens. You're just like, oh wait, I wasn't expecting that. And after that, the stuff that happens, that giant head that goes rah, or hell, or things, or gunky stuff, and all that stuff. There's nothing in it. I mean, when the monster's dragging her around the room on the revolving room, there's no monster there. It's just she's fighting something off that we can't see, which is kind of even scarier than having something attacking, seeing the thing that's attacking her. We just have to imagine what this beast is that's throwing her around and clawing at her, but we can't see it. So, I love practical effects. That's why in the Star Wars movies, I love the first three. I love, because when something blows up, something really blew up. When there's a fire, there really was a fire. The ship, it's a great documentary. I think I told you about it on a Disney Plus. That's about ILM, the special effects house. And the first 3 episodes are all about all the practical effects in the Star Wars movies and other movies as well. Because there was no CGI. I think the early 90s, maybe somewhere around there. Yeah. Around Jurassic Park time.
Okay.
And no, we had fun doing all that stuff, all the effects we had. When there's a scene where things not explode, but air blows at us, they had giant fans that they would instantly turn on, blow wind at us at 100 miles an hour.
There's a clip on YouTube. I'm sure it's a part of a longer documentary, but it's like a 7-minute clip that I found, and it's like the making of Poltergeist. And it shows like them doing the practical effects and all those different things that they had on set. And I'm like, man, I can only imagine how long it took to just build that and to get it prepared, and then to have to shoot it and get it right. And all that is like, I was like, that's crazy.
That's the thing in Poltergeist. The 3 or 4 scenes that, I don't know how many there are actually. It's all the creatures that you see. It's the stuff spinning in the room. It's the ghosts when they come down the stairs. We were looking at screens or at nothing. Actually, I don't even think we looked at green screens or blue screens. But those things were all real. The ghosts were real. They were real people. They had dressed up and they shot them, and then they were ghosts, filmed to look like ghosts. Those creatures were creatures that were handmade. That giant weird spidery thing that yells and tries to eat them, and the clown. I mean, I know Oliver in Las Vegas told the story about the clown, and I don't want to give the clown away, and Oliver can tell that on his own. But there's incredibly clever, complicated, and extremely simple manual effects that are done. The one of the specifically about the clown in Poltergeist that Oliver told us, that I did not know until the trip to Las Vegas. I did not know that's how that certain scene does when the clown, what was it, grabbed him, right?
And that was creepy too. Yep.
That's very, very creepy. And when I found out that day, I mean, I found out, I think the same time you were there and listening to the story, I was like, what? That's how they did that? That simple? That simple thing? That's that scary effect. And he said, yep, that was it. So
Yeah, I remember asking him if he had saw your scene or any of that because I know he was so young, but he was like, "Yeah, no, that stuff was cool to me." He was like, "I would run and go and look," and I'm like, "Really?
oh
Like that
yeah,
didn't bother you?" And he was like, "No, I thought it was cool."
yeah, he thought it was very cool. Yeah, there was some stuff that poor Heather had to do. I'm sorry, and I always get asked about that poltergeist curse and all of that and stuff. And I think it was just some tragedies that happened. And that's,
Yeah.
and there were two very old people who were not well when the second one was being made. And, but, she had to do some terrible, awful, scary stuff too. And I was in Beatrice Straight's dressing room once and we were talking about something and then we could hear her and they were doing a recording session with Heather and where Heather has to scream and say, "Don't, mommy, no, don't keep it away. It's trying to get me." And it was terrifying to be
Mhm.
sitting in a dressing room and hearing this coming from another side of the soundstage. And Beatrice got very upset. She said, "Oh, that's scary that they're making a child do that." And so it came up later on, and Heather was like, "Oh no, it was really fun. I was
Yeah.
just I was pretending."
That's
Oh,
crazy.
yeah, it is pretty crazy. So do you want to make movies? Or just like thinking of
Um,
movies and going to
no,
them?
I think I just like learning about it. Like I like talking to people like you because you've been on sets and you know the experience of it, and just I think that's fascinating to know how movies are made. Yeah.
There, I mean, we've talked about this. We talked at one of the talkbacks that Oliver and I did and recently, and the one of the greatest moments in Raiders of the Lost Ark is after all the fighting and the this and the that Indiana's been through, and he's having to use the whip and this, and he's been chased and beat up, and and then he gets into the marketplace in Tunisia, and then that big giant guy walks up with I think he's got a big knife or a scimitar or something, and goes like this, like, "Yeah, take me on."
Mhm.
And in the movie, Indy just looks at him and takes out a gun and shoots him. And that happened because Harrison got really ill and he had no energy. He was super sick that day. He'd gotten the sickness that we all got, the not being very sick disease, we called it.
Mhm.
And Harrison was exhausted, and he knew they had this whole thing to do that day, and they got there and they just went, I cannot do one more fight. He said, "What if I just take the gun out and shoot him?" And what that does is that it's also a commentary on all of the times in movies where we've ever seen where two people square off. Every James
Mhm.
Bond movie where there always has to be the famous one is I think it's in one of the original James Bond movies, maybe Goldfinger or Thunderball or something, and they've got James Bond tied on a table and there's a laser coming at him that's like pointing right to his crotch that's going to like cut him in half or something, and it takes forever. And I think in like a Mad Magazine spoof or something, somebody went, why don't they just shoot him?
Yeah.
Like, why are they doing this? They're torturing him with a laser that's taking a really long time to get there, and it's just enough time for him to escape. And
Yeah.
that to me is what's so that crazy thing that's borderline genius in Raiders is he just takes the gun out and shoots him because
Mhm.
that's what anybody would kind of do. There wouldn't be a big fight about it. And it all happened because of somebody wasn't feeling well.
Yeah.
And I think there's lots of stories about on movie sets of improvising, or we're running out of time, or throw that speech out, or
Mhm.
any kind of thing like that. And suddenly, oh, that's the ending. That's the ending that works, you know.
Yeah, because some of those things end up being the best things, and then
Yeah, because they're off the cuff. They're
yeah.
spontaneous. And they look spontaneous.
Mhm.
And that's why that moment in Raiders is so funny. And that spontaneity. I think when you're shooting like with the Marvel movies where it's $250 million or whatever, and every single moment has to be mapped out because now they have the LED screens that are tied in with exactly, and they can revolve, and the camera movements can go around, but it all has to be computerized, and everybody has to be in the perfect place,
Yeah.
and it all has to be timed out. And you're like, okay, I mean, if is that what you spent all the attention on? I guess I don't know,
So if
but
you got asked to be in a Marvel movie, you would turn it down?
Oh my gosh, no. If I had asked to be in a Marvel movie, I probably would, you know, say, "Yeah, sure, I'll do that. Please don't put me in one of those suits," but,
Yeah.
there's the dots all over them and stuff. But, that's so funny. If somebody asked me, I absolutely would do it. I don't hate them. I just and like I said, I love some of them. I love the first Iron Man, and I just think what happened was it was formulaic, and not to pick on slasher and gore movies, but
Yeah.
those movies sometimes, as you pointed out, they get formulaic after a while.
No, they do.
I don't wanna say that because I haven't seen them, but I that's my understanding.
No, they do. I think that is a thing with horror movies. I think what was so great about Poltergeist is, like, you don't know what's gonna happen. Like,
You
I don't know you don't know the outcome and what's gonna happen next, whereas I think a lot of modern horror movies have become really predictable, and so you're kinda like, "Okay, I know, like, the killer's around the corner, and when she turns around, you see that he's gonna stab her," and,
Right,
even though it could still be scary for me, it's still kind of like, "Okay, I see where this is going." Whereas, like, I think a lot of older movies, it was like, "I don't know what's happening, I don't know what's gonna happen," and so when things did happen, it was much more of a surprise.
yeah, yeah,
And I think horror movies now kind of just try to go for the shock value, and it's really just the gore and all that stuff, and you're like, "Okay," but, like, you know, that
yeah.
doesn't really, like, stick with you.
Yeah, it's funny, that film about the airplane, the Airplane in Trouble movie that was the precursor of big disaster movies. Having grown up on disaster movies in the 1970s, you knew they were gonna start killing characters off in those
Uh-huh.
disaster movies, and sometimes the biggest stars are the ones that died, and watching that movie from the 1950s, before it started, Stanley and I were making bets on, oh, that guy doesn't have any. It's all the cliches that we now accept as cliches, which
Yeah.
is, oh, that guy barely has any lines. That third guy in the cockpit, oh yeah, he's gonna die.
Yeah.
Oh, that woman is this, and they'll probably kill her off because she's kind of sad and she's gonna have a scene before she dies, and then we'll know she's gonna get killed somehow on the
Uh-huh.
plane. And the wonderful twist of all of that is, well, all I will say about it for anybody who decides, oh, I'll go watch High and Mighty on Amazon Prime, is that doesn't happen. And
Mhm.
and and so watching the movie, it's the reverse of what you just said.
Mhm.
Watching a movie that's 70 years old now, that spawned an entire genre that is very highly codified. Oh, this person has to die. Somebody dies every 15 minutes or whatever.
Yeah.
Figured it out once, and watching this old movie that sort of started all that. Well, that movie doesn't do that. So that's
Uh-huh.
what the surprise was. As you were
Yeah.
saying, like with Poltergeist, we don't know what's gonna happen next.
Mhm.
Wait a minute, the mom's gonna have to go and drag and go into that look.
Yeah.
How's she gonna get back? And wait, you fooled us. The house isn't clean. Something
Mhm.
horrible is happening,
Mhm.
And and I love that, of knowing that movie that I watched a couple nights ago, that was the surprise.
Yeah.
That all that guessing based on modern thinking, or even thinking from
Mhm.
30, 40 years ago. Oh, they're gonna kill somebody off every 7 minutes. No, that wasn't what this was about.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I remember there was an actress, an old Hollywood golden era actress that was in Towering Inferno, and I really liked her. And one of the reasons I wanted to see the movie was because of her, because she made a comeback and hadn't been in any movie in movies for a long time. And then then I'm watching Towering Inferno, and all of a sudden she got in an elevator, and then I was like, no, and the whole audience is like, no, get in the elevator because there's a fire,
Yeah.
and she gets in the elevator, and then all of a sudden this swoosh of fire comes up, and then the cables swing out, and then she falls and dies on fire. And I was like, what? I remember sitting in the movie theater going, I wanna, uh, I don't want to watch this movie anymore. And then there's a supporting character that's in love with one of the other supporting characters, and they get trapped in a burning bedroom, and they're both he's kind of super famous, and she's like a contract actress from the studio that left over from the 60s, and they're trapped in this burning bedroom, and they're telling each other goodbye, and then all of a sudden the next thing, this swoop of fire comes in, and they're both running around, and it's obviously stunt people in fire suits and running
Yeah.
around screaming and throwing the sense, and you're like, this isn't fun. this isn't fun watching people burn up. This isn't, ugh, I don't want to see this. So anyway, I don't know why I'm telling you all these things. It's just fun talking to you, Tiffany.
No, it's fun. That's why I said I really like just talking to other people about movies and hearing their perspectives and things like that, being able to compare like how we felt when we saw certain movies and things like
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, one of my favorite movies of all time is the old movie Casablanca, and was based on a play and that was unproduced. And the original stars were supposed to be this group of people, but that didn't work. And in the end, they got Ingrid Bergman and Humphrey Bogart, and you're like, oh, that's perfect. And when they were shooting, there's a love triangle in the middle of it, and there's a whole thing of somebody's going to escape or not, and is the good guy or the other good guy, or which guy is the woman going to go with, and are they going to get away at all?
Mhm.
And you got to save this one guy because he's fighting the Nazis, and you're like, and they shot like 8 endings. They had no idea how to end the movie, and then finally they came up with one other version and they shot it, and the studio like went, okay, you're out of money, you can't do anymore, and that was the one. And when you watch the movie Casablanca now, it's one of the most perfect endings ever in a movie, and it makes you cry and it makes you laugh and you get a good feeling, and then the movie ends on a and the plane takes off with the right people on the plane,
Yeah.
and 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 it's so unbelievably satisfying. And it took weeks of
Mhm.
shooting 7 or 8 different endings to try to figure out what to do, and suddenly it's like they rolled the dice and it worked.
Yeah.
To me, that's the magic of movies, when
Mhm.
when they work. you know what do you mean you're making a giant movie that's $300 million about the sinking of Titanic? There's been 7 other Titanic movies. No one cares. Why are you doing this? Oh, and then it
Wait,
got,
there has been?
oh yeah, there's oh gosh, there's German ones. There's a mini series based on the Titanic. There's an Oscar-winning movie called Titanic that won an Oscar, which I always find to be the height of irony, because one of the things Titanic wasn't nominated for, because everybody whined about the screenplay, and yet the movie was pretty damn great. The screenplay never won any awards, wasn't nominated, and yet there's a movie from the 1950s called um, Titanic that ended up winning an Oscar for its screenplay. And then,
Oh, I
and
didn't
there's
know that.
another one called it A Night to Remember. That's another one. That's a British version of the Titanic story. And Titanic was originally supposed to be a summer movie, so that would have all summer to make all of its money back.
Mhm.
And then it got postponed to Christmas, and everybody's like, "Oh, it must stink. Must be terrible." And so, but somehow it worked,
Mhm.
and it helped that half the world was madly in love with Leonardo DiCaprio, and
Yeah.
Kate Winslet is brilliant and holds the whole movie together, and
Mhm.
it all worked. All that camera stuff and the CGI, and it all somehow worked. And you just never know. You never know.
Yeah.
You know, E.T. It was written off as a kids movie.
Yeah.
People are like, no one's going to want to see a movie about a little kid and a stuffed animal. Or sometimes it was a little person in a suit, and then lightning strikes, and you just don't know. And I,
Yeah, that was one of the things I wanted to ask you. So, like, after the movie it came out, did you feel the effects of the success? Like, were people coming up to you and like,
people came up to me. Yes, they'd go, "Oh, you're Marty. Why do you? Oh, that's your name, and you're in the movie." I was teaching school at the time. I was teaching drama students in Santa Monica, California, and a lot of them were the children of. I was teaching Jane Fonda's daughter and Barbara Streisand's son, and it was crazy. And so it was a private, very fancy private high school, and when I would, after the movie came out and I would come to school, the kids would chant, "Rip off your face, rip off your
oh,
face," when I would come to class. And but the irony of all this was I still didn't have an agent. I knew 2 or 3 casting directors who would bring me in for projects, usually which I got. Um, and some friends of mine who were casting agents and a couple famous directors hired me, and they would get me interviews with agents. And I met up with one agent. Actually, it was Karen Allen's agent. I got to be good friends with Karen on Raiders, and I had met her agent in Africa, and I was talking to Karen and said I can't get an agent, but she said, "Oh, go see my agent." So I went, and she said, "Oh yeah, I remember. It was so fun to see you in Africa last year, and blah blah blah. And the movie's a big hit, and this and that." And she said, "So Karen says you're in a movie now that's playing?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm in Poltergeist. It's like a giant hit. That's the fourth highest grossing movie of the year." And she said, "Oh, I saw it." And she goes, "Who were you?" And I
Oh,
went, "I was the guy that ate the steak
remember
and the
the face thing?
like
Yeah.
face pulled off." She goes, "Oh, I don't remember that." And I
H
thought,
how could you not remember that?
that's what I thought. And then I thought, because I've been doing this long enough, and I kind of went, she apparently either didn't like it. I thought she didn't like it. She wasn't impressed. She doesn't remember me, but she doesn't want to be rude. So she
Yeah,
said, "Oh yeah, I don't remember that part." And I just thought, how can you not? That's like saying, like, you don't remember. I can't even think of a good example. Like the Titanic sinking, and I don't know,
yeah.
but it was odd, and I never could get an agent.
Wow.
I relied on the casting directors I know to, to call me in for auditions and things. Yeah, nobody would, none of the agents that I met up with. Uh, I got an agent as a writer. That also took me a long time too, because I would I would go meet with writing agents. I'd get set up on these interviews, and one writing agent, very very well known writing agent, said, "Well, what do you write?" And I said, I write dramas, I write comedies, I write
Mhm.
love stories." He goes, "No, no, no, this is Hollywood. You have to write one thing." And I went, "I don't, okay. Hmm, that's interesting." "Yeah, you don't, this was before branding was popular." And he just
Yeah.
said, I would have no idea how to sell you." He said, "I like your scripts, but I have no idea who you are as a writer." So I was
Mm.
like, "Okay, all right." But then I finally did. And now I've had a wonderful, she doesn't represent me for film writing, but for theater writing, she does. And she's been my agent for almost 20 years. She loves me. She understands what I write. So it made me, it was fun. People recognize me in movie lines and theaters and stuff, but no, it didn't. Nope, nobody called me and said, "Get me the guy from Poltergeist who ripped his face off." No.
Yeah. I'm glad you said that though, because I think that's a misconception from a lot of people that if you're in a big movie like that, then things just start happening. Like you just have managers and agents and you're famous, you have all this money, and then you're being offered all these roles and it's,
No, and it's just not like for a supporting actor. I mean, I've read interviews, and it happens with women a lot, especially, Hollywood and women get over 40 and then they vanish,
yeah.
and I remember reading an interview with someone who won like a best actress Oscar, and she's like, "Oh no, I won an Oscar 2 months ago and I have not gotten a single offer."
Mhm.
She said, maybe I'm hard to cast. I don't know. But yeah, you think that. So I don't know. It doesn't. Sometimes it does. Jennifer Lawrence in Winter's Bone, which is a brilliant, brilliant movie if you haven't seen it.
Yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah, she's amazing in that movie. I saw that movie in New York, and I walked out with a buddy of mine, and I'm like, "Where did they find her? Did they have like a talent search in the South somewhere?" And he looked at me and he goes, "No, she's from television." And I was, and same thing happened 40 odd years ago with Deborah Winger. She was in Urban Cowboy, and she was in this, in Terms of Endearment. And I'm like, where did she come from? And it turned out there had been a Wonder Woman TV series, and she played Wonder Woman's younger sister on TV.
Oh,
But like with Jennifer Lawrence, Winter's Bone literally made her a superstar. And
yeah.
the
And then
movie
Hunger Games came out and that was
and Hunger
like,
Games came out, and that
yeah.
was it. It was like nobody was hotter in the entire universe than Jennifer Lawrence.
Yeah.
And between Hunger Games and a couple of that movie that the 3 or 4 movies she was in with Bradley Cooper. But yeah. And then all of a sudden, a couple of years ago, she's like, I'm getting married. I'm having kids. There's not a lot of roles for me. And there you go. And then she was in that wonderful Apple movie about the woman who'd been in the army and she had PTSD, and it all took place in New Orleans. And and oh, it was great. It was a wonderful, tiny little movie. It's a one-word title. I watched it one night on TV and I was like, this is great. She's good.
Uh-huh.
She's still good. I love her. I'd watch her.
I think she had a hit with the, what is it called? No Hard Feelings? That's on Netflix.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I tried watching it. I made it through like 10 minutes of it and went, yeah, this I am not the audience for this movie. No, that's, you
Yeah,
know,
that's like more of a raunchy movie, but I think a lot of people like that because we kinda miss, like, the rom-com,
right.
style
Yeah,
of movie, so that was yeah.
yeah. It was
Uh,
kind of raunchy, wasn't it?
it
Yeah,
was, yeah.
yeah, that's what I
There was,
heard.
like, nudity in it and everything.
Yeah, yeah.
The last thing I was really gonna ask you was just if you had any current projects that you were working on that you wanted to share or talk about?
There are two. There's actually three or four, but the two that are going on right now are a play of mine that was done 2 years ago, which I'm very excited about. It was optioned for Broadway, um, and while we were working that out, we were told that we had to have big giant stars to play the two roles. It's based on a true story. I don't know if I told you anything about it. It took place in the early 1950s, and it's about a Life magazine photographer who goes to South Carolina to do a story about a woman who's a nurse midwife. And it turns out he meets the the nurse midwife that's conducting the class at the school he's visiting, and he decides to follow her. It's all based on a real story, and the nurse midwife, was this tough, she was 5 feet tall, very tough black woman who had been a midwife for 30 years and worked in the backwoods of South Carolina. And he went to her, and he's just kind of super sophisticated New Yorker, and he'd been in World War II and got injured. And he was also a drunk and an alcohol. He had addicted to pills, and he had broken up his marriage. And so it's a redemption story. It's about how he goes there. And instead of oh, he learns from the poor people of the backwoods, or she learns from, it's, they all, that he learns, the woman learns, they they became very, very good friends. And the story that he ended up doing, the photojournal essay that he
Mhm,
did, was, it changed a photo, um, how essays were done for Life magazine, and
mhm.
it made her known worldwide. And so there's that. That's They decided not to do it on Broadway, to make it as a film, and we have two very interesting stars attached to it to play the leads. They're raising the money right now to do the film, so I'm hoping that works out. And also the theater in Houston, where the play was originally done, I enjoyed working there, very, very much. They enjoyed me, they enjoyed the play, and so I got a commission from them to write a new play.
Oh,
And
wow.
I just finished just before I went off to England. And at the end of next month, my uh, myself and four other either writing teams or individuals. I think there's one musical and then three straight plays. And we're all going there for a week. Each of the shows will get rehearsed for a stage reading, and
Mhm,
then over a weekend, one play will be done Friday night, one will be done on Saturday, and then two will be done on Saturday, and then one will be done on Sunday. Mine looks like it's going to be done on Sunday. Mine's a real. I don't want to write fake made up stories anymore. I love finding real life stories and
mhm,
telling them. Um, and so this is about two American Army generals in the Air Force. Once it looked like they were going to win, the U.S. was going to win the war in Europe. They sent these two generals to the South Pacific to figure out how to win the war there before there would have to be an invasion of Japan, or B, we would have to use a nuclear bomb, which they weren't sure was going to work yet.
mhm,
So it takes place in real time, and it's about the hour and a half long meeting that these two generals had to decide basically the fate of the world in
mhm,
January of 1945. And they're both very, very interesting guys. And the third character is a young soldier, um, who sort of works as one of one of the general's assistant, and he sort of gets in the middle of all of this, and in the last 20 minutes of the play, he becomes very, very important in the story. So I'm going to Houston next month for a week, and I'm excited to see how that works out. I'm really excited about the script. I've given it to a couple friends who've read it, and they were very excited about it. It needs to lose about 10 pages, which I will do probably on the very first day of rehearsal, and I'm excited about that. So we'll see what happens with those two projects. I don't know. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Congratulations.
thanks. Yeah, it's very, very exciting, and if we can keep the female woman, the actor, we went after to play the midwife. You know, we tried to get Viola Davis, we tried to get Octavia Spencer. We had Halle Berry for about a month, and then she something interfered with her kids and the time, and and a couple other Oscar winning black actresses, and the woman that we ended up getting hasn't won an Oscar yet, but she's been nominated for one, and I just think she's extraordinary. And so we'll see. They're putting a package together of performers, and it would be really cool if it worked out. I would be super excited. So
Yeah, that sounds exciting.
that's very exciting. I mean, when they called me, and the male lead, I can't say the names, but the male lead has like 4 Oscar nominations. So I'm like, I was like, what? They told me who it was, and I almost fell over.
Oh,
Yeah. We'll see what happens. Hollywood is crazy. You never know.
that's
As the
true.
point of all of our conversations today, of all the little odds and ends and stops and starts, you just never know.
Literally this. I just watched Poltergeist last year, October.
Yeah,
That was
that's
my first time watching it. Then I meet you, and then now I have you on the podcast.
Tiffany. I was very honored you asked me to do this, and I was really pleased to do it. It's a pleasure, and I hope I wrote to the people at some of those shows, and I said, I haven't done them in a while, but I had a really good time. I'd love to come back and do some more. So
Yeah.
it was a blast, and I know that I think some people, I think you were there. Some of the women were talking about having a convention in another state and
Yeah.
kind of making it women focus, which I thought was really cool. So, and then they said, well, we'll have some guys and you can be there too. And I said, okay,
Yeah.
that'd be all right. So, but I hope we get to see each other again. So,
Yeah. I think they're trying to bring it back again to Vegas next year, I
oh,
think.
good. Yeah, that
Yeah.
was, I had such a good time. And it was so great that you were there the first day. And then when you came back, Oliver and I were like, she came back, and you hung out with us all day. We were so happy. I was so excited.
It
So,
was funny because I think I told you this already. I had an interview planned that Sunday. So I was like, I don't know if I'll come back. Like I didn't plan for it. And then it got canceled. And I'm
uh,
like, okay, well, I'm free. So I'll come back. And then
uh,
Oliver was like, oh, you came back. It was meant to be.
oh, it was meant to be. We were both, Oliver and I were so excited. So yeah. Anyway, thank you for asking me to do this. And
Oh, thank you.
there we go.